Well, hey there, guys. I'm Axel the Beast, and this is the Curiosity Shop, the ZeldaEngine.net video mailbag where I answer your Zelda questions. And you know, I haven't been gone for 2 weeks or anything. Yeah, sorry about no mailbag last week. We had technical difficulties getting this whole new camera to work. As you can see, it's a little wider, video quality's better. There's also a new background because I couldn't run this awesome camera on my other computer. It couldn't handle the awesome, so it's on, well, this computer because it can handle the awesome. Our first question comes from the Neckbreaker. Thus far, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that every Legend of Zelda except Majora's Mask has had the character Zelda. What do you think of Zelda-less games? Should there be more? Well, off the top of my head, I can actually think of one other, but I can't think of any others aside from those two. That would be Majora's Mask and, you know, Link's Awakening. Now, Majora's Mask did have Zelda, but it was only in a flashback. So you're right, she didn't make an appearance in person. But, I think that it worked for that game because it was a side story. It was a continuation of the story from Ocarina of Time, but it wasn't a story that dealt with the main themes. I think that it works for the side stories, because, you know, Link's Awakening was the same thing. It was Link on a voyage, probably after saving Zelda, and, you know, he didn't meet Zelda on the island he went to. I think it's for these side stories. The lack of Zelda makes sense, but I think that, you know, it's the Legend of Zelda series, so for the most part, the game should have Zelda. A couple games without her are fine, but keep in mind that without her, you can't have as much of the dynamic of, you know, the old fable where the hero comes and he rescues the princess from the evil. Now, I talked about this last mailbag, and it's seeming like a trend. I think it's probably going to end up being brought up more than once. Maybe even in this mailbag. I mean, maybe, who knows? Comeback King asks, one of my favorite Zelda game quests is the Trading Quest. I am kinda disappointed that no game since Ocarina of Time has included one. What are your thoughts on this? Well, actually, since Ocarina of Time there have been at least two, probably more. In the Wind Waker, you had to trade the weird little decorative items to the Goron merchants on the various islands to get the magic armor and the heart piece. And in Twilight Princess, in order to get to the city in the sky, you had to do like a non-optional trading quest. It was part of the thing to get to the dungeon. As far as what you're saying, I do like the trading quests, and I do think that they should. I mean, I think those games, they didn't do it in quite the same way as we're familiar. They were a little less substantial, and I think that they could do better. But at the same time, I don't think that trading quest is so crucial that they have to do it, and have to do it just as good and the same in every game. I don't think it's what makes Zelda Zelda. I think that, well, they should still have it sometimes. I think it's okay to try other ideas or try to do it differently. I don't mind that so much, and I think that, you know, trying to stick to a small idea like that is gonna, in the end, bog down a game that might otherwise have a very unique identity. Dinokura asks, Vaati appears in both the Minish Cap and Four Swords. In the Minish Cap, he appears in a humanoid form where he stole the magic cap and transformed into a powerful mage from a Kokiri. In Four Swords, he is in a beast-like form and is called the Wind Mage, who is sealed by the Four Sword. My question is, are they the same Vaati, a recurring villain similar to Ganon who reappears on a constant basis, or completely different and the name is simply a reference? I think that because they have the name, it's clearly the same character. I mean, Ganon, some people support multiple Ganon theories, but I don't think there's a lot of basis for that, other than perhaps inconsistencies between the games, which exist throughout the Zelda series. They don't need an explanation. They can't be explained. As for, you know, there are inconsistencies with Vaati, like, you know, dying in the Minish Cap and suddenly he's a monster. The same could be said for Ganon between certain games, at least. Some games explain it. I think you really just gotta say that there's stuff between the games that Vaati appears in that was never explained and was never covered. As such, there are issues with connecting them timeline-wise, just as there are between all games. But I think because I don't think there's a lot of reason to think they're supposed to be different characters. They're just, they were probably originally designed as standalone stories, but that's the farthest it goes with that. I think it's the same character. There's no explanation for why he's different in both games. Somehow maybe he was revived, turned into a monster, etc. Maybe, I don't know. It's just stuff like that. That's all I can really say. It's something that Nintendo hasn't explained, and it's just, yeah, it's like that. Egg asks, there's always talk about wars in Hyrule. For instance, when the Hero of Time was in the Temple of Time, there was a war in the fall of Hyrule, but we never see it. How do you feel about a Zelda game set in the midst of an actual war? Say Link could be caught up in it, family killed or something, and the game actually follows his way through the war. Maybe he becomes some kind of general or something. I actually agree with you that the constant references to wars are interesting, and I would like to actually see them. There's a couple problems with that, though. One is that a war is a very different kind of dynamic to the game. It would definitely be totally different from the hero rescues princess from evil fable. Oh my god, I totally called it. I did mention this in this mailbag again. I mean, it's not like I planned these out by writing down all the questions and at least coming up with some of my response ahead of time. No, I definitely don't do that or anything. But, you know, wars are violent by nature, so if a Zelda game were to make them, it would be grittier, more violent, etc. And you have to realize, you know, if you've seen the mailbags, you know I have some objections to that. It could work for one game, though. And the changing of the dynamic or whatever and the kind of story it is can work for a game. I don't think there's a problem with trying experimentation for, you know, a certain game. I just don't think it's a good idea to change it for the entire series, and I don't think that's what you're suggesting. So I'd like to see it at least once, for sure. I think it's something that could work out for a slightly darker Zelda game, and I think it's worth exploring, especially since it's something that would be refreshing and very interesting to see for once. Trevor asks, what is your opinion on the backstory from the Majora's Mask manga? For those who don't know, the manga actually has this story from Majora's Mask's origin, where this monster existed in the time before Termina or whatever, the land that was Termina, and he was actually defeated by this hero who sealed his immense power in a mask that he carved from the monster's armor. Now, even for those who think that the mangas are canonical or argue it, which there's some argument for, but I really don't support it, and it's really generally accepted as not true at all that they are canonical, the creators themselves have more or less said that this story isn't canonical. They said that they made that story as a chapter of the manga when they needed to make a chapter. It was a serial or whatever. When they hadn't actually had much information about what happens in the game, so they basically made it up as a fairy tale, a fictional thing that wasn't part of the actual continuity, but could fit in anywhere and just act as, you know, a fairy tale story. It wasn't true, it was just an interesting thing. As for what I think of it, I thought it was cool and interesting. It was great to hear a version of Majora's origins, even if it wasn't canonical. As long as you realize it's not canonical, it's great to appreciate it. It was a very interesting and intriguing take on the story, even if it doesn't necessarily match up with a lot of the canonical data. Twinkie asks, Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks sort of had a bird's eye view like the older games. However, the 3DS can actually handle the 3D Zelda gameplay the DS couldn't, as proven by Ocarina of Time 3DS. Do you think this could indicate that we will never see another bird's eye view Zelda game again? Definitely not, because you know, the games on the DS, they were 3D. I mean, whether or not they had the bird's eye view, they had fully generated 3D graphics. I mean, you can even see this during the cutscenes and stuff. It wasn't an issue of the DS being unable to handle a full 3D Zelda game with 3D gameplay. I mean, I believe the DS actually had better graphics than the 64. I might be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's what I heard. So, I mean, the N64 had Ocarina of Time, and Majora's Mask constantly considered some of the best Zelda games, so obviously wasn't incapable of it, they just chose not to. Now, that's all I can say. I don't think there's any reason to think we won't see that perspective again, because that's exactly what they did with the DS. They actually made games in that perspective when they didn't have to. I don't know if we're going to see them for a while. We probably won't, actually. I think they're going to take a break for a while. But, I don't think we've seen the end of it at all. I don't think they should ditch any of their gameplay types, so I don't think we've seen the last of it. Soon asks, in Ocarina of Time there is a hidden gossip stone behind the Great Deku Tree. The stone says, they say that one Kokiri has left the forest, but he is still alive. Is this the Kokiri that left Link, and why is this stone hidden? I definitely think it's Link. There's no other reason to think it could be referring to anything else. I mean, nothing else is explained, so Link is the only possible explanation. As for why it was hidden, I have no idea. I mean, maybe it's because they stuck it behind the Deku Tree because the Deku Tree was heavily related to Link. I don't know. Maybe just because it was more significant. There's no explanation for that one, sorry to say. But it's definitely Link. There's nothing else it could be. I mean, what else could it be? Hero of Hyrule asks, I was recently playing the Minish Cap, and I'm to the point where Link is on the cloud tops. And when you talk to the Wind Tribe people, one of them says that they used to live on your land, but then they moved to the sky. Possible plot for Skyward Sword? There are two contradictions to this, though. One, the Minish Cap wasn't made by Nintendo, and two, another Wind Tribe member says they were forced to move by Vaati. Anyway, what are your thoughts? Well, actually, that's a really interesting theory. I didn't make that connection, and that's actually very plausible, and I have to give you props for actually thinking of that. The thing is that in Skyward Sword, one confirmed fact we have is that Skyloft, the land above the clouds, used to be part of the land below, which is probably Hyrule, although they haven't confirmed that yet. So, I think that, you know, your two contradictions that you list, wasn't made by Nintendo. Yeah, it wasn't, but Nintendo had a lot of involvement, and the plot of Minish Cap is canonical, so that's not a disapproval at all. As for Vaati, yeah, that could be a contradiction of some things, like Vaati's death, etc., as we mentioned earlier in this mailbag. But, at the same time, it could just support the fact that Vaati could be the villain of the game, so I wouldn't say that it's a contradiction necessarily either. I mean, some people have thought that. I myself have occasionally supported that notion. Once again, props. Again, we don't know, but again, we don't know what the game has in store. We'll have to see, but it's definitely interesting to note, and I have to give you props for bringing that up. Alright, last question. Hylian09 asks, in Ocarina of Time, the Water Temple mini-boss is Dark Link. I was thinking, wouldn't it make more sense to put Dark Link in the Shadow Temple since it's the evil half of Link, and that fits more with the theme of the Shadow Temple? Why would they put him in the Water Temple, or is it just the game designers putting an even harder element into a hard temple? Well, I don't know where you're getting the idea that he's the evil half of Link. He was never explained in that game. In fact, I don't think he's ever really been explained fully. But, the way I see it is even though he came out of Link's shadow, he was supposed to be a reflection of Link. That fits with the evil thing anyway. The water water reflects. It makes a reflection of yourself. That's a constant thing in any fictional thing that they do with water. That's even in real life. I mean, of course. But, the thing is that he functions as a reflection. He mirrors your movements, he uses all your attacks, etc. I really think that was their intention, so I think it works with the Water Temple. I mean, Shadow is... It's not a shadow, really. It doesn't... a reflection and shadow don't mix. As for, you know, there's other things you could do to explain it as more of like a pacing issue or a placement issue where, like, the Water Temple was in the middle of the game, so it felt like a good time to have a major confrontation other than Ganon. Other than that, I can't really say. It's probably just the reflection thing. Well, alright guys, that's it for this time. Be sure to send your questions to me using the contact page down in the description, and I'll see you guys later.